you to come and join us and help out.
So cool.
Yeah,
because
wonderful.
Robert,
The other part about it is that we are in a position now to actually install curtains for people if they can't do it themselves.
Good on you. Now, I'll just mention that name. That's Community Energy Action, CEA Christchurch. Robert, kia ora. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. You have a great evening.
Is Robert from Tamaki and relocated, I wonder?
I didn't ask that question. The journalists. Good to have you, Liam. Take the stairs tomorrow. Send us the tweet.
This was brought to you by Otautahi Christchurch.
More on that tomorrow. Wanipara, kia ora. I'm Wallace Chapman. 3:45 tomorrow. How about a Friday? Lisa Owen and Checkpoint next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown's budget ultimatum, sell up the shares or suffer, and the verbal grenades lobbed into the councillors' foxhole.
Well, a lot of them, in fact, not particularly financially literate and with a severe aversion to making difficult and unpopular choices.
Mike Lee, who was singled out, joins us. Details of the government's joint buyout scheme for cyclone-damaged homes too risky to rebuild. There's rates relief for red-stickered Auckland residents. And does a bypass mean the road to nowhere for businesses? And sound the alarm, someone keeps pinching the tsunami alert sirens. What for? Well, you can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Talofa lava, I'm Evie Ashton. Hundreds of people in Hawke's Bay are now getting to grips with the news they can't rebuild their cyclone-wrecked houses. People in 2,500 homes can stay, but there will have to be more flood protection work. More than 230 homes can't be rebuilt, with the government deciding the risk of future flooding is just too high. Much of the Esk Valley is in the highest risk category 3, unsafe to rebuild. An advocate for the Bayview and Eskdale communities, Louise Parsons, says it's been an anxious wait for residents.
I mean, the Esk Valley's basically gone, hasn't it? It's all category 3. I think there's mixed reactions. I think some people are yay, they want to go, and some people are going to be devastated.
The government expects its buyout of cyclone-damaged houses in the North Island to cost $1 billion. Nearly 700 properties, 400 of them in Auckland, can't be rebuilt. Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson says the cost of the voluntary buyout scheme will be split between central and local government.
And we are working with councils on issues such as valuation criteria, how we deal with insured and uninsured, and who ends up with the final ownership of land.
17 houses in Tairāwhiti have also been classified as unsafe to live in, 14 of them in Gisborne. Aucklanders in the worst-hit homes will find out their fate from June the 12th. The Mayor of Auckland has called on councillors to honour the pledge they made to keep rates low. Wayne Brown today confirmed his plan to sell all of the council's Auckland Airport shares in a bid to cover the city's budget shortfall of $375 million. He called out some councillors by name, reminding them of their pledge not to allow rates to rise above inflation. But one of those named, Mike Lee, says there's another pledge that's just as important to him.
He's not worried about the pledge I made not to sell publicly owned assets, particularly those that earn income.
Mike Lee says he doesn't think the Mayor has enough votes around the council table to ultimately sell the shares. You'll hear more on this on Checkpoint shortly. The Department of Internal Affairs says media regulations are out of date, riddled with holes, and don't properly cover online platforms. It's today released a draft plan making traditional and social media subject to the same rules regarding what content can be aired. A new independent regulator would oversee the system. Department spokesperson Susan Doig says the current oversight legislation was written before social media existed.
New Zealanders have told us many times that they are experiencing harm from the content that they and their families consume, and that the existing measures and safeguards are not fit to deal with this.
The public have until the end of July to give their input, after which the proposal will go to the government. Hatohone St John has unveiled a second ambulance accessible to patients who are overweight in Auckland. The bariatric ambulance is designed to comfortably transport patients weighing upwards of 200 kilograms or those with complex health needs. St John Ambulance Operations and Health Services General Manager Deborah Larson says it's for patients whose needs go beyond what a standard ambulance can provide.
There's more room. The equipment in these ambulances enables patients and staff to be moved safely in and out of the ambulance while maintaining everybody's dignity.
Deborah Larson says the equipment uses air to take away all of the manual effort of moving people. And Canada is to become the first country in the world to put health warnings on individual cigarettes. Manufacturers will be required to print messages on them, such as poison in every puff. The government says the labels will make the warnings virtually unavoidable. To sport now, and David Havili will miss the Rugby Championship because of a serious hamstring injury. The All Blacks midfielder, who limped off during the Crusaders' recent win over the Waratahs, needs 2 months to recover, and the All Blacks open their campaign in just over a month. Meanwhile, manager Darren Shand has announced he'll step down post the World Cup after nearly 20 years in the job. Novak Djokovic is unrepentant about writing a political message on a French Open camera lens. He wrote, "Kosovo is the heart of Serbia, stop the violence," after his first round win. Sports editor Stephen Hewson reports.
France's sports ministers labelled the Serbs' action as inappropriate. But Djokovic, speaking after his second round win this morning, said he doubts he can be part of a drama-free Grand Slam, adding controversy drives him. The phrase Djokovic wrote is in reference to recent tension in Kosovo, which declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Serbia has never recognised Kosovo's independence. The world governing body, the International Tennis Federation, says Djokovic's statement did not violate any rules because the Grand Slam rulebook does not ban political statements.
And in cricket, England bowler Josh Tongue will make his debut against Ireland at Lord's tonight and also earn a family friend $100,000. 14 years ago, the friend bet $200 at odds of 500 to 1 that Tongue would play for England, and he's now set to collect. That's the news.
Teachers lay out their bottom line.
I'm not interested in money, and that's all I'm hearing at the moment. It's just pay that everyone cares about, and that's absolutely not true.
Flood-hit Wairoa residents learn their fate.
There's going to be a lot of heartbreaking tears for those people who are told basically that no one can ever build where they are. The reality is that we just can't carry on and have a loss of life like we did.
And the Lego dinosaur bites back.
I bumped my head onto one of her teeth and I had to go to hospital where I had some stitches, and the doctor didn't believe me that it was a dinosaur that caused the stitches.
Getting our teeth into news. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, also for Bay of Plenty, partly cloudy, isolated showers becoming more widespread and possibly heavy for a time tomorrow afternoon. Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country. Cloudy periods, a few showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow, briefly heavy. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, generally fine, but the odd shower tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine spells, a few showers, possibly heavy about western Nelson, clearing tomorrow morning. For Canterbury, mainly fine with high cloud, but rain near the Divide today. Buller to Fiordland, periods of rain or showers with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. Otago and Southland, showers about Southland and Clutha, possibly heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, rain for a time this evening, then the odd shower tomorrow. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers tomorrow. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint i tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Carrot and stick of shame was the theme of Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown's revised budget reveal. He's offering to reverse planned cuts to the arts, social services and community boards, but only if the city sells its $2 billion worth of Auckland airport shares. But a bigger rates rise is still on the cards. In a chaotic event, Mr Brown laid out his plan to plug the city's $325 million budget hole. His rambling speech was peppered with barbs aimed at everyone from the media to council agencies and ended with a roll call of specific councillors he urged to get on board with his plan. Our reporter Finn Blackwell and camera operator Marika Habazi were there.
It was a carefully stage-managed event. So much so, some members of the media were told they couldn't attend. Newshub, TVNZ and Stuff were shut out, blocked from entering the announcement.
A lot of people are quite interested in the fact that I've got to fix a budget for Auckland, but it appears some of the media have decided that they don't want because they weren't all invited, but some of the media have been pretty nasty, and we did invite media who are sensible and the media who are not weren't invited and have now decided some of them to bugger off. Well, that's all right with me.
The journalists were eventually let in after the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Max Hardy, eventually gave them access to the room mid-speech. In a sometimes rambling 30-minute address, the Mayor attacked Auckland Transport, not least for what he called the CCO's Ponzi downtown offices.
I expect that we will be out of here within the next 2 or 3 years and moving into the more utilitarian building in which the council is, in which there's a fair bit of space and we can cram in more. Personally, I'd have them in Nissan huts in Huntly, but that's a bit hush.
He also put the boot into some local boards.
My own local board here, I live in the city, is a bit guilty of some dumb things as well.
He had a dig at Heart of the City.
I've been critical of the pompously known Heart of the City, which should be much better called the Auckland CBD Business Association.
He insulted his own councillors.
He also inherited a returned cast of councillors, quite a lot of them, in fact, not particularly financially literate and with a severe aversion to making difficult and unpopular choices.
And there were plenty more jibes at Auckland Transport.
Poor old AT have provided a lot of them. Did you realise we spent $76,000 on walking tours at AT? And the number of people who took those walking tours was 52.
But insults and attacks aside, Wayne Brown's main objective was to show off his revised budget. Things that were on the chopping block, the arts, Citizens Advice Bureau, and cuts to local services have been reversed. But the big but is the Mayor says councillors need to back his vision to sell the airport shares.
Just to service the ownership of the airport, 27,000 households pay rates just so we can own the airport to get nothing back.
And he called out the councillors who had previously signed a pledge not to raise rates by more than inflation, yet wouldn't support selling the airport shares.
The pledge says, I pledge to all Aucklanders I will not vote for any new targeted rates nor any measure that will increase the total average burden of rates, levies and other compulsory council charges above the rate of CPI inflation. Well, if you're signing that, I don't know how you're going to put your hand up and vote against selling the shares. So we know who you are, we named you. I'm expecting you to honour your pledge. You're good people, you're standing up there for the thing. Walker, Watson, Fletcher and Lee.
One of the councillors who was called out by the Mayor was Wayne Walker.
Well, he's obviously applying a considerable amount of pressure to councillors. There's no question about that. I still don't believe that the councillors have had all the options put on the table, and obviously we need to go through them in a stepwise fashion. And the sale of airport shares is something that should be considered after we've fully explored all of the other options, and that doesn't necessarily mean selling all of the shares. I mean, there's a spectrum there.
And that's the battle Wayne Brown now faces, getting the numbers around the council table to back his revised budget. Some Aucklanders are still not convinced selling the airport shares is the way to go.
I think it's an important resource for us to have some management control over, and selling it means that we give that control to somebody else.
They spend $2.4 billion a year on capital expenditure. They could cut that by 10% and it'd save the budget deficit.
I feel like there's not a lot of return from what I've heard on that investment, and I think the council could use that money to put into creative industries, homeless. Yeah, I think there's other things they could do with it. Free it up.
I mean, it's sort of up to them and what they think, if they want the money to improve the city itself.
I just ask for the media to please clear the exit. And
journalists weren't able to ask Wayne Brown questions after his speech, which he concluded with a parting shot at AT and the culture of extravagance represented by its downtown offices.
We could house the entire AT workforce in council-owned buildings, and I expect them they were there before I finish. So if you're the last to leave, turn the lights off.
And if you were listening to that on radio and you want to watch it in its full glory again, the video version will be on our web page. Councillor Mike Lee was one of a multitude of people called out by Mayor Wayne Brown in his combative budget speech. Mr Lee is one of a number of councillors who promised not to raise rates higher than the rate of inflation.
The pledge says, I pledge to all Aucklanders I will not vote for any new targeted rates nor any measure that will increase the total average burden of rates, levies and other compulsory council charges above the rate of CPI inflation. Well, if you're signing that, I don't know how you're going to put your hand up and vote against selling the shares. So we know who you are, we named you. I'm expecting you to honour your pledge. You're good people, you're standing up there for the thing. Walker, Watson, Fletcher and Lee, you stood for something or other, act on it.
Well, here's Mike Lee's reaction.
He's not worried about the pledge I made not to sell publicly owned assets, particularly those that earn income and provide an alternative funding stream to rates. He's not holding me to that pledge, which I certainly made very explicit.
So can you support the proposal he's tabling today?
No, I can't really, but we're trying to help him because I don't think he's got the numbers, and it's not just 4 people he's named. Ironically, the people who've been supporting him, it's not those 4. It's a majority of the 21 people around the council, and I don't think he has a majority. So he has to think about a plan B that's acceptable to the elected members, but also, more importantly, acceptable to the people of Auckland, and he needs to focus on that rather than calling out people. After all, this is a man who kept his plan to privatise all of the airport shares secret until after the election.
So,
he never once mentioned it.
Before we move on to Plan B, what do you think the numbers are? What is the split as you understand it?
Well, I'm not entirely. Who will know really until the votes are cast? But at this stage, I'm hearing reports from what I understand and from what the mayor's office is telling people. They don't quite have the numbers. It'll be close. These things normally are.
You're not about to flip?
No, it would be totally short-sighted, expedient. It would be the wrong thing to do. It will disinherit future Aucklanders from this legacy, which this year coming alone will bring in $42 million as an alternative to rates, and the year after I think 60 and so on. He's going to get rid of that, and it's totally short-sighted, and it's not a sustainable place to be.
Okay, so Wayne Brown's already picking over the books to see what savings he can get, and this proposal would still mean a bump in rates. Can I get a yes or no from you, Mike? Could you stomach a partial sale of the shares?
My initial response would be no, but if that's the only way to save some sort of catastrophic outcome that's being presented, I will look at it. But I see that as opening the door to the enormous pressure that has been put upon councillors by council management and outside consultants who are almost frantic to get the council to start selling airport shares. Given they're claiming, including the mayor, that it's a bad investment, it's kind of hard to make sense of it all. But I'll tell you this now, that there are people out there who are desperate to get their hands on ratepayers' property. And if there's one pledge that I will honour over all others, and that is I will not sell out. I will not sell out the heritage of future Aucklanders or the people today.
So, Mike, is there enough trust and goodwill, given the big long line of call-outs that Wayne Brown made in that speech today, and there was a few barbs, is there enough trust and goodwill for the councillors to sit down and negotiate a workable plan? Is that realistic?
I really hope so, because the people of Auckland put us all into office, and we have to work together. And there's no point in sort of calling people out. It's silly, really, given even he wasn't aware of the crisis that was. And I have put a question mark around that crisis as well. I think to a large extent this crisis has been engineered by people wanting to get their hands, or working to alienate those shares from the people of Auckland. I think we're not being well served in terms of financial advice from our senior management. I'll be plain about that, and I think the Mayor should think twice about the advice he's getting, because it wasn't evidently his idea, but he's brought it hook, line and sinker, and I think it's a failing strategy. It's failed in the past and it will fail in the future. There are better ways of managing the public's finances.
And that's Auckland Councillor Mike Lee. Well, let us know what you think. Should the councillors vote to sell the airport shares or find another way to fill the budget hole? Let us know if you reckon they should get rid of them altogether, just some of them, or not at all, and why. You can text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 19 minutes after 5, kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thousands of homeowners have been told they're unable to rebuild on their properties post-Cyclone Gabrielle. The government says initial indications show this will be the case for about 700 properties, 400 in Auckland and more than 200 in Hawke's Bay. Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson announced a voluntary buyout scheme at a press conference this afternoon. Our Cyclone Recovery reporter Kate Green has the story.
Residents knew it was coming, but the news that whole neighbourhoods are unlivable has still come as a shock. In Hawke's Bay, there are currently more than 230 homes that cannot be rebuilt, and 17 in Tairāwhiti, mostly in the city. Much of the Esk Valley has been deemed Category 3, unsafe to rebuild, along with areas of Pakowhai, Rissington and Tangoio. During the cyclone, Pakowhai resident Gary Spence watched the water climb over his roof. Now his Brookfields Road property has been put in Category 2, meaning it can be rebuilt, so long as nearby flood protection is strengthened.
A great relief, yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, within a kilometre of my property, they've categorised them as 3.
He plans to rebuild and says there's still a long road ahead.
It's a relief to get some kind of answer, but just reading through some other reports, it now could be even next year before we actually get the okay to rebuild.
In Esk Valley, Billy McDonald's home has been put in Category 3. But while the property was flooded, the house was unscathed. He hopes it will be reassessed so the family doesn't have to leave.
Yes, the Esk Valley was badly affected and there hasn't been a lot of progress, but it is still a very, very nice part of the world. And it will come back. The orchards will come back, the vineyards will come back, but maybe just with not as many neighbours.
Louise Parsons, a Whirinaki resident, says it's been an anxious wait for residents. Her home has been put in Category 2. The government also announced a voluntary buyout scheme, of which it will share the cost with local councils.
I think there's mixed reactions. I think some people are yay, they want to go, and some people are going to be devastated.
The numbers for affected properties in each area are being released by councils one by one. Louise Parsons says her community all received emails with detailed information about their property, along with which category it's been put in. But Aucklanders will have to wait a little longer. Deputy Mayor Desley Simpson says council staff have been working as fast as possible, but they won't be ready to start contacting owners of high-risk properties until the 12th of June. Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson says while the granular detail is yet to come, the announcement of the buyout scheme should give some people some peace of mind.
Different communities today are getting information a slightly different way. What they're all getting is certainty that if you are in Category 3, there will be a voluntary buyout regime. And I know for some of the communities in the areas that aren't in Hawke's Bay, that certainty is welcome.
In addition to those written off entirely, The government says up to 10,000 properties will need better protection, such as higher stop banks or better drainage, to make them suitable to live on. In Wairoa, where there are no red-zoned homes but more than 600 needing infrastructure upgrades, Mayor Craig Little is worried about the cost.
We don't know who's going to pay for what. And as I've always said, Waira is quite a struggling council like a lot of other councils. So, we don't want to put future generations under a lot of pressure where they can't do anything.
Tonight, a group of local Māori leaders will meet to discuss what the categorisations mean for their whenua and marae. Ngāti Kahungunu Chair Baden Barber has spoken with two marae in the Category 3 area and says they're devastated.
They were very sad, as you can expect. But, it just raises the question, so what does that mean? And we've been here this long, what you expect us to move? Where do we move to? Some of these valleys, that's the land that they have. They don't have land anywhere else.
Around the Motu, communities which have not yet heard which category they fall into continue with the anxious wait.
It is 23 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai Ofakaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Do get in touch. What do you think of the Mayor Wayne Brown's revised budget plan for Auckland? He still says all the airport shares need to be sold in order to keep funding some of the things that were going to get cut. Also, your reckons on the government's plan to partially, with the council buy out properties that can't be rebuilt on because of fears of more flooding. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time we headed to the headlines. Ko Evie Ano tēnei.
5 murder charges have been laid in relation to the deaths of 5 people in the Loafers Lodge fire in Wellington last month. They've been laid against the man already in custody on 2 counts of arson. Hundreds of Hawke's Bay people are getting to grips with the news they can't rebuild their cyclone-wrecked homes. The government has decided more than 230 houses can't be rebuilt as the risk of future flooding is too high. Much of Esk Valley is in the highest risk category, meaning unsafe to rebuild, and community advocate Louise Parsons fears this means the end of settlement there. The government expects its buyout of cyclone-damaged houses to cost $1 billion. Altogether, nearly 700 properties, 400 of them in Auckland, have been deemed unrebuildable. Cyclone Recovery Minister Grant Robertson says the cost of the buyout will be split between central and local government. And the Mayor of Auckland has called on councillors to honour the pledge they made to keep rates low. Wayne Brown today confirmed his plan to sell all of the council's Auckland airport shares in a bid to cover the city's budget shortfall of $375 million. He called out some councillors by name, reminding them of their pledge not to allow rates to rise above inflation. But one of those named, Mike Lee, says there's another pledge just as important to him, the one not to sell public assets. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, everything in the main centres seems to be moving normally. If you know differently and can text us safely, do so on 2101 and tell us your news. Otherwise, our next traffic news and headlines are at 5:40.
Kia ora rā iho. The Whitelock family have had a big impact on Canterbury rugby. Now 2 brothers will link up again in the south of France. Veteran Crusader and All Black Sam Whitelock has signed a 2-year deal with Po, where he will join his younger brother Luke. Sam says the lure of playing with family again was the motivation behind his move.
I had the privilege of playing for Canterbury, Crusaders and the All Blacks at different stages with a brother or brothers. It was amazing being here with the Crusaders when all 4 of us were here. There was always the drive of being better, but then there was that family dynamics chucked in. So if you're getting a bit grumpy with an older brother, there was a family nickname come out and some of the players like, what's going on? But the older brother knew what was going on.
And we're joined now by sports reporter Felicity Reid. So, Felicity, the lure there is not the red wine, fine cheese and croissants. It's not going to be the first time Sam Whitelock has played for an overseas club. Is France where he plans to end his career?
Well, maybe he's had a taste of that sushi, because it was the brief stint in Japan where he played for the Panasonic Wild Knights, but he was only had 5 appearances for that club in 2020 before he was back here playing for the Crusaders. So I think that first overseas experience maybe showed him that not everything goes to plan, but with a 2-year deal in France, I'm sure he's hoping that this time will be a little bit different, and especially as we've heard there that Luke will be there, Luke has actually been there since 2019, so he'll be acting as Sam's translator for a while there as well. But Sam also, in today's announcement, highlighted that there's lots of different options in front of rugby players now. They can go to Europe, Japan, and he also pointed to the emerging American competitions. So it might not be that his final stop is actually in France, but he does say he doesn't know how much longer he can keep playing. He does want to be playing good rugby, and in his words, I don't want to be one of those old grumpy guys hanging on. But he did actually bring up John Arfour, who we mentioned yesterday, that 39-year-old front rower who was called into the Crusaders last week. And I have to say, I didn't actually hear Sam completely rule out a return to the Crusaders. I mean, it's a franchise where he's actually the second most capped player, and he's just narrowly missed out on beating Wyatt Crockett's record there. So even though this appears to be his last Super Rugby season, if the Crusaders get into another injury crisis in a few years, maybe he'll expect a phone call.
On to netball now. Now, this is interesting. So it's two Auckland teams battling for supremacy in netball's domestic trophy, which is on the line on Sunday. But they're going to be playing the grand final in Hamilton. What do they think about that?
Yeah, well, having the two Auckland teams qualify for the ANZ Premiership final was probably Netball New Zealand's worst nightmare, especially after they'd already locked in the Hamilton Glowbox Arena for this game even before the season had started. So Mystics captain Sulu Fitzpatrick, she did admit to me that she was a bit perplexed by the situation. She says the preference would definitely have been to have the Mystics have home court advantage for the final, and as they were the minor premiers, so they finished at the top of the table at the end of the regular season, that would normally give you the right to host this grand final. And she'd said, like, the last time the Mystics hosted the final was back in 2021 at Spark Arena, and they actually set a record crowd for a domestic game, so that was 5,000 people there for that, and they lifted the trophy. So you can kind of see why she was wanting to be playing in Auckland. But it's actually the opposition, the Stars, who might have a bit more to be upset about. The Stars only locked in their finals berth with a win in a close elimination final on Sunday, which has actually left Stars fans struggling to get tickets after we assume the Mystics fans have actually snapped them up. So Stars coach Kitty Wills told me that playing in Hamilton doesn't faze the team. It's only a short drive down the motorway. They've had a bit of success there. But she has taken a swipe at the way that the ticketing for this final was actually done. She says, especially in a neutral venue, tickets should only go on sale when both finalists are known, so that both sets of fans have that equal opportunity to pick up tickets. And with Glowbox Arena, I understand it can fit around 4,000 people in for a netball game. So Will says at that you would expect most of their fans should have been able to get tickets. Some of their their families have got tickets, and some of their members have got tickets. But she says it's those other people that really want to get down and support them haven't actually had the opportunity to do so.
Thanks for that, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid there. The Department of Internal Affairs says our media regulations are out of date, riddled with holes, and don't properly cover online platforms. It today released a draft plan to make traditional and online media subject to the same rules. Hamish Cardwell has more.
Social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter and YouTube would be subject to the same rules as traditional broadcasters and newspapers under the reforms proposed today by the Department of Internal Affairs. An independent regulator would be created to enforce a new code of practice, which all media platforms over a certain size would be legally required to comply with. It could put the New Zealand government at loggerheads with the social media giants. But DIA spokesperson Susan Doig says the current legislation was written before social media even existed.
New Zealanders have told us many times that they are experiencing harm from the content that they and their families consume, and that the existing measures and safeguards are not fit to deal with this.
The current system is too complicated and can result in bizarre cases where the exact same content is subject to different rules depending on where it is published.
An example of that at the moment is we have completely different approaches for managing content broadcast on free-to-air television versus content that's on commercial video on demand platforms.
Chief Censor Caroline Flora agrees.
What we are seeing in the internet age is an explosion of content. We do what we can, but our tools are no longer fit for purpose.
Broadcasting Standards Authority Acting Chief Executive Helen Cruz says the current process for making complaints about media content is too confusing. And she says the Broadcasting Standards Authority only has jurisdiction over 1 in 5 of the complaints it receives.
We do get people frustrated, angry people on the phone because they're coming to us with a problem and we can't help. It shouldn't be like that. It should be straightforward. There should be one place you go.
The Department of Internal Affairs says it has been in talks about the changes with the large offshore social media companies. The proposal could require them to change their algorithms so controversial material gets suggested less. They could also be compelled to put warnings on explicit content. But questions remain about how to get media giants like Facebook and Twitter to comply with the new rules. Susan Doig from DIA promises that the new regulator would be at arm's length from the government.
There is simply not the mechanism in the system that we're proposing for a new regulator to lean over to one of the news broadcasters and say, take that down.
She says self-regulating industry bodies like the Media Council could be carried over into the new system, with possible higher standards required than under the current regime. The public have until the end of July to give their input on the proposal.
It is 27 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e NINA, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me in the studio to talk all things business. 2 degrees. Now, it expects to be offering customers 100% mobile service coverage within 2 to 3 years. I'm picking this as in competition to One, which, used to be Vodafone, and
That's
their
right.
satellite system. But is it just text? Are they talking about calls? Tell me more.
It's kind of an interesting one. It's basically low orbit satellites. So, we might have a really big satellite, and that could produce some kind of coverage, but that's very expensive. So what this company is offering, it's a startup from the United States, a company called Link. And it's sort of like, imagine it's a bit like a ball of yarn, a whole bunch of satellites. So they're expecting to maybe have about like a couple hundred just moving across our path, I suppose you would call it, over and basically sending beams down and connecting directly to a regular telephone. You don't need a satellite phone.
Right. So it's your normal mobile.
Right.
But is it text message or is it calls as well?
It's going to
Do we
be
know?
both, but it's also going to eventually be broadband. So these satellites that they're deploying are about the size of a pizza box. They're really tiny. I know. The technology has moved on so much. So they reckon that initially it's going to be like messages. So the Internet of Things. So if your cup wanted to connect to the satellite, it could pick it up as it's passing. And this will be useful to, say, a number of infrastructure firms, for example, that may have towers and what have you that need servicing. So they'll kind of be able to communicate with these satellites in remote places where there is no cell phone coverage. And that's also going to be very useful in a case of an emergency, which we've had recently where our network went down, for example, in the cyclone Gabriel. So then the satellite could supplement that by sending an emergency signal to everyone without having a mobile terrestrial coverage. So it'd be from a satellite that would happen, and they could direct it. So it's it has some benefits, and it's fairly low cost. I think a couple $100,000 per satellite, whereas some of the larger ones, well, certainly a lot more than that. So interesting.
The race
times.
is on.
The race is on. Yeah. But as they said, it's going to take some time before they get up to something like a broadband. But what they said was some connectivity, especially in the case of something like Gabriel, is better than no connectivity.
Yeah, people experience that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, consumers appear to be doing better at managing debt than businesses. Tell us more, Nona.
That one's quite interesting. So this is a report by Centrix. They're a, credit agency. They say that households are looking like they're getting a grip of managing their debt. So there was a 28% drop in mortgage lending year on year, but there was also a fall in the number of defaults, slightly though, just a slight fall. So the April monthly report showed 411,000 people were behind in their debt repayments, but that compared with 427,000 in March. So that is a slight improvement. But when you look at business, it's less so because businesses seem to be under even more pressure than they were before. Credit defaults up 13% for businesses, and liquidations an increase of 31%. So businesses are suffering, And so if you can support your local business, you should.
Right, Nona, let's take a spin, please, around the markets.
Right. Okay, so the NZX Top 50 Index, it just ticked up at the very end. It was quite strong. It finished up 0.9%. That's nearly a whole 1%, by 103 points to 11,916. The Kiwi, though, still under pressure, trading at 60.1 US cents, 92.2 Australian, 48.3 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. 40 what? How many British pence? Say that again?
48.3. Yeah, okay. Because, we used to like to say 50 something.
You did, yeah,
but
exactly.
No, we're not there yet, so we'll get back to you.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. A sigh of relief at the 11th hour for Auckland homeowners with flood and cyclone-damaged properties. The council's told some residents that they won't need to pay rates for their uninhabitable homes, but residents say the news came at the very last minute, causing unnecessary stress at a time they're struggling to juggle a mountain of extra costs. Tom Taylor has this report.
It's like my dream home. I've just, as I said, just put double glazing in there, insulated it, new kitchen, and modernised the whole thing because it's a cute little cottage. But it's just devastating, as I said.
Parnell resident Lucy Harrison hasn't been able to enter her home since the January floods.
The slip came down here and created this massive dam, so this blocked all this way here.
Late yesterday afternoon, she got an email telling her she wouldn't have to pay rates for the second half of the financial year.
I just said, yahoo!
The email came just 2 hours before Aucklanders' rates were due, and Lucy questions why it took so long to arrive at the decision.
It's been such a battle to get it. I can't believe they just didn't go ahead and give us that, which the other council has. We've had to go through such a process, such a fight to get this approved, and it just seems ridiculous.
That other council she's talking about is Hastings District Council, which offered red-stickered homeowners automatic rates relief after Cyclone Gabrielle. The council also added yellow-stickered properties to the list after community consultation showed this group was being left high and dry. Other councils took a similar approach. Thames Coromandel was quick to announce automatic relief for residents with uninhabitable properties, granting it just 3 days after the cyclone. Ms Harrison says while these councils paved the way, Auckland Council dragged its feet and put the burden on ratepayers.
We've had to fill out, I think, about 3 or 4 forms of a grant for council in the way of the different instalments, the 4 different instalments, and we've had to plead hardship to be able to get our rates relief. And so the grant is going to pay back the council, so the council's created a grant that's paid back the council. Very complex and complicated, where the council could have just relieved the red sticker people.
Huapai resident Colin M had his house red stickered after the January floods. Although it's recently been downgraded to yellow, he still can't live there. While he welcomes the rates support, he says it's just the tip of a titanic iceberg of costs mounting up.
To be honest, it's great. The rates relief's great, but in the situation we're in, we've got a lot of other stuff on our plate.
Mr M won't have to pay the $110 a fortnight worth of rates for the last 2 quarters, but he's still facing major rebuild costs for his flooded home, plus rent for a place down the road while that's getting fixed up. And he says even after rebuilding, there's every chance his home could get flooded again.
It's been a real slow process, and it's quite frustrating that for us, because we know 99.9% sure that it will flood again here. That's just how it is with all the new housing, and they haven't done too much with the infrastructure or the drainage, and it's just a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. So we don't really want to live here again, so we're just in limbo.
Further west in Muriwai, Maria Coppins has been out of a home since Cyclone Gabrielle swept through in mid-February. She says the council's rates respite is appreciated, but she's been through a lot of needless anxiety waiting for it to come through.
Well, it was a sigh of relief because that's one less bill to pay, but it was also delivered at the very last second after causing great stress.
Auckland Council Head of Rates Valuations, Ronwyn Heath, says the council decided in March to reopen its emergency relief fund and boost it by $1 million in order to provide rates relief for residents with uninhabitable properties, regardless of the colour of their stickers. Applications for this fund closed on May 5th, and residents were notified whether they were successful on May 16th, but this email lacked any detail on the level of support to be granted. That detail, full rates relief, only came yesterday, just hours before the rates were due. And residents don't know what the future will bring, with the council signalling at this point that residents will continue to receive rates notices as normal from July the 1st, regardless of whether they're living in their homes.
All right, let's stick with a theme here. The Auckland Council, specifically the Mayor Wayne Brown and his revised budget released today. So much feedback on this one. And there's a general theme here. This person says pledging to keep rates low at all costs is not an option. This from another listener, though. I'm disgusted at Wayne Brown all-round aggressive bullying approach. It is abrasive, rude and demeaning. Who does he think he is? Picking and choosing which media outlets can attend, calling out councillors for their stance, criticising the heads of council entities, suggesting AT staff be stuffed in tin sheds. He's a man from a bygone age and his bullying and brashness is not acceptable in 2023, says Tracy. And this is another listener's words, not mine. Who is fact-checking Wayne Trump? Sorry, Brown. Another person says, sorry, Auckland, but you voted Wayne in and you get what you choose. No complaints now. 2101 on text if you would like to join that conversation. It is 18 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program tonight. 2101 is the text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie standing by. Ananga Evie, mina pita pita kōrero.
The man already in custody on 2 counts of arson over the deadly Loafers Lodge fire in Wellington last month has now also been charged with murder. 5 people died in the fire and the police have laid 5 murder charges against the 48-year-old. They've finished their scene examination and the site is being handed back to Fire and Emergency. The National Party says it's broadly supportive of the government's plan to offer buyouts to homeowners who can't rebuild after Cyclone Gabrielle. Nearly 700 properties, 400 of them in Auckland, have been deemed unrebuildable. National's Deputy Leader, Nicola Willis, says it's frustrating it's taken this long to reach this point, but overall her party supports the plan. Te Whatu Order says its restructure, which it embarked on in March, is taking longer than expected. It had intended to announce the first lot of decisions tomorrow, but has postponed the announcement without giving a new timeline. The Department of Internal Affairs says media regulations are out of date, riddled with holes, and don't properly cover online platforms. It has today released a draft plan making traditional and social media subject to the same rules regarding what content can be aired. And Fiji's Prime Minister, Sitiveni Rabuka, will next week make his first official visit to New Zealand since being elected last December. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, great news for commuters in all the main centres. Traffic appears to be still moving as per usual. Our next news and weather are at 6.
Surprise, surprise. Known for its outlet stores and specialty shops, the lower North Island town of Otaki was also famous as a traffic bottleneck. That was until the opening of a new expressway bypassing the town over the Christmas holidays. So what's happened to the shops? Well, our reporter Jimmy Ellingham finds out.
Otaki, for so long a congestion black spot for drivers heading in and out of Wellington, now the congestion's gone and traffic flows. I easily found a park when I pulled in to see how the late December opening of the Peka Peka to Otaki bypass has affected shops lining the quieter main street.
It was a bit quieter to start with because of course everyone has to try that new road. But we've found that business has definitely creeped back up. The locals love it because they can get down here more. It's just great because we have such a local base. Weekends, sometimes it's like, what expressway?
That's Catherine Goodwin from the Streetwise Coffee Cart.
People are still coming through. They still want really great coffees. And I think the on and off ramps, they work really well in conjunction with the town. It's definitely a win-win.
One nearby retailer, who wouldn't be named, was less enthusiastic, saying the lack of traffic has killed the town. And that's true for at least one outlet, which will soon shut its doors. But Holly Wilson at the Bendon outlet says there are pluses and minuses.
A lot easier for customers to shop, parking, crossing the road. We get a lot of comments about that, but we have noticed that footfall has dropped off.
So, she says the new road is overall a slight negative for the shop.
I think the novelty's kind of worn off since the expressway opened. Everybody was able to come in and shop and experience what it was like without being so busy in town. But yeah, it's definitely dropped off. Weekends are still great for us, but during the week it's definitely a lot flatter than it was a year ago.
Speciality shops are more positive, such as Robin Dowden at the Artel Gallery Plus store.
There's been a lot more customers coming in from Wellington saying they've been up on the transmission gully and everything and saying they can find a park now and they're happy to come in and browse for longer and they're less stressed out about coming up and yeah.
And Books & Co owner Jackie Simpson.
Some weekdays it's certainly a little quiet, but it sort of overall it balances out, and I think we still get those visitors on weekdays that come for a drive and come and visit. So, and we do website orders, and our local sort of support from the community is still really strong, and that's what keeps us going too.
Kirsty Keynes at fashion store Caravan & Co likes the quieter road so much she thinks authorities should go further.
I think that they should pedestrianise the main street and make all the cars go round the back and get some cool bars and restaurants and stuff going, like really bring people down here.
Maybe that's on the menu. Waka Kotahi Regional Manager Mark Owen says design work for changes to the main road through Otaki will start soon, ahead of construction.
There's probably going to be about 2 years' worth of work, so that'll start probably next year, and this will obviously help access into the Otaki township and along that corridor for the people that live and have to move along there.
Not surprisingly, there are fewer crashes on the old State Highway 1, but it's too early to get reliable traffic count comparisons since the expressway opened.
Before we built the project, we had sort of in the range of 16,000 to 21,000 vehicles per day on average, sort of heading along that corridor on the old State Highway 1. Fair to say, obviously the through traffic is using the new alignment, which has made Otaki Township more of a destination, so they're seeing significant benefits of less congestion.
Retailers really do hope people stay in Otaki.
And it is 12 minutes to 6. Kia amo tuna mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Sound the alarm if it hasn't already been stolen. Thieves are targeting Auckland's tsunami sirens, despite the fact that they apparently cannot be modified to play music. But it's leaving some areas without an early warning system if disaster was to be looming. Adam Maggs from Auckland Emergency Management joins us now. Kia ora, Adam. Why would people want these?
Kia ora, Lisa. Look, that's a very good question. We've heard about this the siren battling, but interestingly, our technicians have said that these sirens are specifically designed for alerting, so there's no way that they can be basically retrofitted for playing music. So essentially, I'm guessing they're getting a piece of scrap metal once they pull these things off the pole.
Adam, please explain for those who don't understand, siren battling?
Oh, look, I think it's a situation where people get these loud sort of siren horns and place them on vehicles and play music very loudly in the middle of the night. I think that's basically what they do, and I believe it can be a sort of competitive situation that plays out.
So they might be looking at these thinking, good for a bit of a siren battle, but as far as your technical people know, they cannot be altered, adjusted, modified in order to do that.
No, look, that's right. And look, what's disappointing is in the last 6 months alone, we've had 31 siren units stolen from the network, which basically means, 40% of our siren network has been compromised through either vandalism, trying to get them off and unsuccessful, or the theft of them outright.
So can you just go down to the shops and buy a tsunami siren replacement?
Good question. Absolutely not. So these are actually bespoke units. They're not off the shelf. They're hard to source. We can only source them offshore. They're also a discontinued line. So they're basically dated technology. We actually installed them back prior to the council amalgamation in 2008, 2009. So the units themselves are just about at their design life end date. So that creates a lot of challenges for us as well in terms of, do we replace them? Do we decommission them? That's the challenge we face.
Yeah, and what's the risk when they disappear?
Well, look, the risk is obviously people can't get access to the tsunami siren alerts, but in saying that, not all of Auckland has tsunami sirens. In fact, a relatively small portion of our coastal area does. Those systems are old and not entirely effective, only probably 40% are potentially working effectively. And there's already other ways of warning people. So in the last decade, of course, we've seen the evolution of the emergency mobile alert, which is a very effective way to communicate with our public, social media, television, and of course radio, the medium that you work on. So we've got a strategy for a region-wide alerting approach. However, we're being driven because of this vandalism to just considering now potentially the decommissioning of the legacy siren system and looking at something that's more suitable.
Well, because that's kind of interesting. A lot of strings to your bow there in terms of the warning system, but not everybody is on those platforms and is on the internet and all the rest of it. So it's kind of a practical, straightforward warning system. Is there anything that you can do to deter people from flogging them or making it harder to remove them?
Well, another great question. Yes, we've absolutely tried that. Obviously, we're working closely with police, so we advise police of every incident where either people are interfering with one of the units or if they've actually taken them. The public have been great also in terms of either notifying council or police. And we've also taken security measures to try and make the units much harder to remove from the poles. However, that's still not preventing people having a go and trying to pull them off the poles. So, and the other big risk is that these things are wired to the electrical network. So they're dealing with 230 volts, minimum 400 volts by playing around with these units. So it's a risk to themselves in terms of their health and safety as well.
Absolutely. So what would you say to these dorks?
I would say, look, just leave them alone. You're compromising one of the tools that we use to notify our public. Find something else to do with your time.
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate you joining us. That's Adam Maggs, who's from the Auckland Emergency Management team there. So just if you're eyeing them up, they serve no purpose once you detach them. You can't play music through them, apparently, so just leave them alone. Public transport advocates are accusing Auckland Transport of neglecting Huapai and Kumeu residents despite years of calls for a railway line to the city's northwestern fringes. 1,200 homes are under development in Huapai, with the council expecting its population to double by 2030. Yet residents say the public transport there simply isn't good enough. Jordan Dunn went west to find out more.
Neil Robertson is a keen train enthusiast and has been advocating for better services across Auckland as the chair of the Public Transport Users Association. For 8 years, he's been asking for passenger rail from Huapai to the city, to no avail.
The only thing that seems to have gotten in the way is AT. AT seem to be sort of pathologically opposed to this scheme for whatever reason.
The suburb is already kitted out with platforms and a functional rail track sitting idle. And there are diesel passenger cars sitting in storage deteriorating. Mr. Robertson says it's a no-brainer.
We're not asking for a lot, we're just asking for trains to run on a railway that exists and stop at stations that exist.
He says if started today, the rail cars could be repurposed and a line from Huapai to Swanson Station could be up and running within a year. But he says time is running out.
I feel that if these rail cars are not repurposed by about this time next year, it'll be very expensive to repurpose them. At the moment, they're very serviceable, but I wouldn't leave them too long.
The 8 rail cars sitting at Glenbrook Vintage Railway Station were decommissioned once electrification started on the Pukekohe to Papakura line. They made their final trip in August last year. Greenpeace climate advocate and former Auckland City Councillor Christine Rose started the Trains for Huapai group to fight for change. She says politicians are getting in the way of making rail a reality.
Decision makers just need to get on with it. It's not that this can't be done because we have got that railway line and we have got existing stations and the rolling stock's out there or could be procured. I think it's bloody mindedness that is the main obstacle. Decision makers just need to get on with it.
So would Kumeu and Huapai residents use a train?
Yes, I would, definitely, because it would be so much easier to get around. Just walk up the road, catch the train. I'd be able to get to Henderson and New Lynn without catching 2 or 3 buses.
At the moment, we just rely on the bus, so we don't have other option when we have to go to the city.
Absolutely, I think so. I think that's like what's definitely missing in the area, because we only have like Albany bus station really, and I've often thought like a train system would be amazing.
AT's General Manager of Integrated Networks, Mark Lambert, says the reason for rejecting rail comes down to cost.
There is no funding for additional services, and right now Auckland Transport's focused on restoring our existing public transport services, improving reliability and enhancing those existing services where we can.
Mark Lambert says the future of Auckland's northwest involves more buses. However, he says there are discussions about potentially using the diesel trains during Kiwi Rail closures.
All right, let's get to some more of your feedback. So much of it coming in on Wayne Brown's revised budget. This is Auckland's Mayor. This person says the Auckland shares were gifted to Auckland. They should not be sold. That from Sue. Another listener says, put up the rates already. Selling the airport shares equals stupid. Someone else says no, followed by multiple exclamation marks. Sell only 350 million of them. Okay, so a partial sale. That would wipe out the council debt, they say, and would still have a healthy reserve that will increase in value from grant. That one. Congratulations to Mike Lee from another listener. We just know consultants and some rich people can't wait to get their hands on the airport shares. Another says Wayne Brown should be working positively with his council team to find a budget solution, not poking the borax at the media and various councillors. He is not a team player. It is the Auckland community that he should be focused on, not his own ego, reckons Simon. Another says, who are these people with bottomless pockets nagging about Wayne Brown, a mayor working for ratepayers for the first time in years? Can the optional benefit user pays will sort out the arts? Another says, keep the airport shares, raise the rates to the level needed to protect services and keep building a better Auckland. Peter says, never sell critical infrastructure. Now, the public must have a stake to ensure that those assets are fit for service at a reasonable cost to users. And Kathleen has got in touch and says, will Wayne Brown start charging competitive rates for the use of golf courses? The museum is used by far more Aucklanders from far more diverse communities and often with very limited incomes. Why should they pay to go to the museum for educational and social outings? What is the point of having a museum if it is not well used? That from Kathleen. Now, a number of you are getting in touch about the golf courses, saying that maybe we want to consider selling off those rather than the airport shares. Linda says, I was taught from a young age never to sell the family silver. Perhaps I am financially illiterate too. Another thing that a lot of you are highlighting is the fact that these shares were gifts. This listener says the shares are Manukau shares. Auckland sold theirs off years ago. Auckland Mayor has shown himself to be a bully, naming councillors who don't agree with him, this listener says. And another says, is the proposed sale of Auckland Council's airport shares a case of rich Auckland using the assets of poorer Auckland? The old Manukau City Council retained its airport shares, while my old council, Auckland City, sold ours. How is it good business to sell off strategic assets?
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Talofa lava. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. 5 counts of murder have been laid against a man already in custody over the fatal fire at Loafers Lodge in Wellington. The 48-year-old man was being held on 2 counts of arson. Police have already informed the victims' families about the new charges. Meanwhile, police have finished their examination of the fire scene in Newtown. The site will be handed back to Fire and Emergency today. Once FENS has completed its work, the site will be returned to Wellington City Council and to the building's owner. An Auckland councillor who's been called out by Mayor Wayne Brown for his stance over selling Auckland airport shares is standing firm. It's predicted the vote on the budget, which includes selling the shares to help to plug the council's debt, will be tight. Mike Lee is one of several councillors who promised not to raise rates higher than the rate of inflation. He's adamant that keeping the shares in the council's hands is the right way forward.
There are people out there who are desperate to get their hands on ratepayers' property, and if there's one pledge that I will honour over all others, and that is I will not sell out. I will not sell out the heritage of future Aucklanders or the people today.
Mike Lee told Checkpoint he hopes a workable budget plan can be reached. An Esk Valley resident can't understand why his home, which escaped the worst of Cyclone Gabrielle, has been put in the high-risk zone. More than 200 homes in the Hastings district won't be rebuilt because of the risk of flooding. Billy McDonald says his family is still living in their home in Esk Valley as water didn't get in during the storm. He hopes his home will be recategorised because his family wants to stay.
The property we built specifically for the needs of our son who's disabled, and it took us a very long time to find land suitable to build.
Billy McDonald wants his home to be reassessed before he even considers the voluntary buyout scheme for Category 3 properties. 17 houses in Tairawhiti have been classified as unsafe to live in, with the land considered no longer suitable for residential use. Gisborne Mayor Riet Stoltz says it's a devastating blow for the homeowners and communities. 14 of the houses are in the city. The government expects its buyout of cyclone-damaged houses in the North Island to cost $1 billion. Overall, nearly 700 houses can't be rebuilt. Aucklanders in the worst-hit homes will find out their fate from June the 12th. Auckland Council is providing full rates relief for residents with homes made uninhabitable by the January flooding or Cyclone Gabrielle. The relief covers rates for the third and fourth quarters of the financial year for residents who applied for the Council's Emergency Relief Fund. Muriwai resident Maria Coppins welcomes the rebate, but questions why confirmation only came through on Wednesday afternoon, the same day a rates instalment was due.
Well, it was a sigh of relief because that's one less bill to pay, but it was also delivered at the very last second after causing great stress.
The council says people with direct debits set up won't have rates payments taken, and those who have already paid will receive a credit for future instalments. The Department of Internal Affairs says proposed changes to the way the media is regulated won't affect editorial decisions in newsrooms. The department has today released a draft plan making traditional and social media subject to the same rules to be overseen by a new independent regulator. Spokesperson Susan Doig promises that the regulator won't have power over decisions about legal content.
There is simply not the mechanism in the system that we're proposing for a new regulator to lean over to one of the news broadcasters and say, take that down.
Susan Doig says the regulator will also be kept at arm's length from the government. The European Union and the United States say they expect to draft a voluntary code of conduct on artificial intelligence. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, says governments felt fierce urgency to regulate the technology. Here's the BBC's Tom Singleton.
AI has been making headlines since late last year, when ChatGPT captured the public imagination with its ability to generate unnervingly human-sounding text. Since then, the biggest tech companies in the world have been scrambling to launch AI-powered products. But as the AI race has intensified, so have fears about where it is leading humanity. This proposed code of conduct is an attempt by the US and EU to address those concerns. They say they hope to involve other countries, including the UK, India and Japan.
A defamation case by Australian war veteran and VC winner Ben Roberts-Smith against 3 newspapers has been dismissed. Mr Roberts-Smith launched the defamation suit after a series of articles were published in 2018. The ABC's Isabel Rowe reports.
The Victoria Cross recipient sued the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, the Canberra Times and 3 journalists in the federal court over a series of stories published in 2018. He said they contained false allegations of war crimes in Afghanistan, bullying of his former Special Air Service Regiment colleagues and a domestic violence against a woman in a Canberra hotel room. But a federal court judge has dismissed the cases, finding almost all of the allegations made were substantially true or contextually true. The judgment concludes one of Australia's biggest defamation cases. A decision as to who pays the costs has been adjourned for 21 days.
And warnings of dangerous avalanche conditions have been issued for alpine areas in Aoraki Mount Cook National Park for the rest of today and for tomorrow. The avalanche advisory says the risk is high for high alpine areas and considerable for alpine areas down to 1,200 metres. That's the news.
Tomorrow on Afternoons with Jesse Mulligan, our critter of the week was discovered just 5 years ago among rocky outcrops high in the mountains of North Otago. It's nocturnal and it matches the night sky with a stunning starry pattern on its back. Plus, on New Zealand Live, Jasmine Mary playing songs from their highly lauded debut album, The Licking of a Tangerine. That's on Afternoons from 1 p.m. tomorrow here on RNZ National.
We're on air, online and on demand. You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Partly cloudy. Isolated showers becoming more widespread and possibly heavy for a time tomorrow afternoon. From Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country, cloudy periods. A few showers turning to rain for a time tomorrow, briefly heavy. Gisborne to Wairarapa, generally fine, but the odd shower tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine spells, a few showers, possibly heavy about Western Nelson, clearing tomorrow morning. For Canterbury, mainly fine with high cloud, but rain near the divide today. Buller to Fiordland, periods of rain or showers with some heavy and possibly thundery falls. Otago and Southland, showers about Southland and Clutha, possibly heavy and thundery. Elsewhere, rain for a time this evening, then the odd shower tomorrow. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with a few showers tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thank you, Evie. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Australia's most decorated living soldier has lost a historic defamation case against 3 of the country's biggest newspapers. With costs at an estimated $35 million, it is one of the most dramatic and expensive trials in Australian legal and military history. Victoria Cross recipient Ben Roberts-Smith launched the defamation suit in 2018 after a series of articles accused him of unlawful killings while he was deployed with the SAS in Afghanistan. He was also accused of bullying former comrades and domestic violence against a woman. Ben Roberts-Smith denied all the claims. This afternoon, the defamation case was dismissed. The ABC's Isabel Rowe reports.
The Victoria Cross recipient sued the Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, the Canberra Times and 3 journalists in the federal court over a series of stories published in 2018. He said they contained false allegations of war crimes in Afghanistan, bullying of his former Special Air Service Regiment colleagues and domestic violence against a woman in a Canberra hotel room. But a federal court judge has dismissed the cases, finding almost all of the allegations made were substantially true or contextually true. The judgment concludes one of Australia's biggest defamation cases. A decision as to who pays the costs has been adjourned for 21 days.
In his judgment, Justice Basanko found most of the allegations of war crimes against Ben Roberts-Smith were proved by the defence argument of substantial truth. Those allegations included that Roberts-Smith murdered an unarmed man by kicking him off a cliff and ordering soldiers under his command to shoot the man. ABC reporter Alison Zhao looks back at Ben Roberts-Smith's career.
An Australian hero, courted by politicians and adored by the public. 12 years ago, Ben Roberts-Smith was awarded the Victoria Cross for Australia, the military's highest honour.
And daring in the face of the enemy.
He went on to become chair of the Australia Day Council and was awarded Father of the Year in 2013.
Ben Roberts-Smith is a great Australian hero. He is someone that all Australians look up to in every respect.
The celebrated war hero served multiple tours in Afghanistan.
Ben Roberts-Smith has broken down while giving evidence in court today,
as he sues 3 newspapers and 3 journalists for articles that he says falsely accuse him of war crimes and of assaulting his former lover.
The defamation trial spanned more than 100 days of hearings, involving former and current elite soldiers providing detailed accounts of missions in Afghanistan. Ben Robert-Smith is the son of Len Robert-Smith, a former Justice of the Supreme Court of Western Australia. He was educated at Hale School, one of Perth's most prestigious schools. He joined the Army in 1996, doing 2 deployments in East Timor, before earning selection in the SAS in 2003.
The people that want to join the SAS usually have an affiliation with a combat corps. They want to feel the pride and the honour of being part of an elite unit.
Ben Wadham is an expert in army culture at Flinders University in South Australia. He describes the conditions in which SAS troopers fight.
They have to be able to be extremely fit, a very high level of endurance, to be able to keep on pushing your limits, walking long distances, engaging in high tempo activity for an extended period of time if you're placed under combat conditions.
After his military career, Ben Robert-Smith was rewarded for his service to Australia and spoke often of the Anzac spirit.
I believe it speaks about who we are as a people and what we believe in. Service and sacrifice, integrity, honesty, mateship, who we are as Australians.
On leaving the Army, he turned his talents towards becoming a leader in public life and undertaking further study with an MBA at the University of Queensland. He became an employee of Seven Network under Kerry Stokes, the billionaire boss bankrolling his legal fees. The veteran has reportedly put up his Victoria Cross as collateral.
A bill to suspend the US federal debt limit has passed the US House of Representatives with a clear majority, easing fears of a potentially disastrous default. It's a critical step to avoid economic chaos, which could have come early next week without congressional action.
Yeas are 314, the nays are 117. The bill is passed.
And the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Republican Kevin McCarthy, defended the bill after the vote passed.
We decided that you had to spend less, and we achieved that goal. Is it everything I wanted? No. But sitting with one House, with a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic President who didn't want to meet with us, I think we did pretty dang good for the American public.
The next hurdle is a vote in the US Senate scheduled for next week. President Biden has urged the senators to pass the bill as quickly as possible so he can sign it into law. The BBC's Nomia Iqbal watched the vote on Capitol Hill.
Well, when the bill passed, there was a sigh of relief in the chamber, certainly by the moderate Democrats and the moderate Republicans, who were glad that finally it cleared the first hurdle. There was unhappiness. Of course, we expected that from other members of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party who voted no to the bill. It's really interesting to me when you look at the numbers. Yes, they got well over 218, 314 yes votes in the end, but there was a significant rebellion by the Republicans. 71 Republicans opposed the bill, and that includes members of the Freedom Caucus who are ultra-conservative. They wanted deeper spending cuts. And then there were 46 Democrats that voted against it, and that includes obviously members of the progressive part of the party who are really concerned about some of the welfare restrictions that have been included in the bill. So the kind of reaction that we expected from those people, we expected that. But I think overall there's a sense of relief by most lawmakers. But of course, the next battle is the Senate. Ultimately, they need to get 60 votes in the Senate. We know that 51 Democrats they control the Senate by a slim majority. But it goes to the Senate, and if there's unanimous consent, then it will skip the debate bit and go straight to a vote. However, there are some people who have indicated that they do plan to hold a debate, certainly from the Republican side. For example, the South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has said that he would do that. So that could drag it on for a bit longer. It again has to get Republican support, and we understand there are about at least 6 Republican senators that said they will vote for the bill. So if it does pass the Senate, again, it's going to be a very bipartisan bill. It will get to President Biden's desk. He will then sign it. But it's worth remembering that when you look at the bill, the way it's been structured, it's been done so intentionally so both sides can say, the Republicans and the Democrats, to their constituents, to their voters, we got what we wanted.
US General David Petraeus, a former commander of international forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, believes Ukraine is ready to launch a counter-offensive. After meeting President Zelensky yesterday, General Petraeus is confident that Ukraine's army would be able to break through Russian lines. He says Ukraine's forthcoming counter-offensive could be, quote, very impressive, and that Russia's operations over the winter largely failed.
I believe that we'll see for the first time in this war on either side the achievement of true combined arms effects. In other words, the results of tanks protected by infantry against anti-tank guided missiles, artillery and mortars keeping the enemy's heads down, engineers reducing the obstacles, breaching these fortifications that the Russians have established, air defense keeping the Russians off the Ukrainians, electronic warfare jamming the Russians' already inadequate command and control facilities, and all orchestrated by very, very good Ukrainian command and control, and also using drones out over the Russians to attack them in depth with the precision munitions that the US and UK and others have provided. And this, I think, is going to break the front lines. Where they do this attack, I won't speculate on that, although the Ukrainians have publicly stated that their objective, of course, is to sever that ground line of communications that enables the Russians to go along the southeast coast into Crimea. And I think this is going to be impressive. We achieved combined arms effects, say, during the fight to Baghdad when I was a two-star general, and it's terrifying for the enemy. And the difference this time over, say, what happened in Kharkiv last fall, where the Ukrainians did carry out a very successful attack, is that when the lead elements culminate after 72, 96 hours, it's as far as you can physically go. There are follow-on forces that will capitalize, that will exploit and maintain the momentum and continue this. And then I think you get the battlefield, you make it dynamic. Then the Russians have to react. They have to move to try to reestablish a defensive line somewhere in the rear of where they are and where they were. And noting that on the Russian side, this is a force that has been battered, that many of these units have been in constant combat for well over a year. They're not pulling units offline and reconstituting them, in other words, replacing the losses, the people, the equipment, and retraining them. They're just adding people to the front lines. That's not the way you produce a cohesive, coherent, well-disciplined organization. And I think, therefore, that's why they're going to crack, crumble, and perhaps actually collapse. And then if you can get the Russian defenses really moving, then I think there are opportunities even more broadly.
It is 18 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Not long after the war in Ukraine began, reports started to emerge of Ukrainian children being taken by Russian troops over the border into Russia. 15 months on, and officials in Kiev claim more than 90,000 children have been taken this way. While the figure can't be verified, the BBC says it understands many children have gone from care homes and residential schools. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
It is the most anxious journey of these mothers' lives. Dashing to reach the children they've been separated from for 6 months. Ukrainian children sent to summer camps run by Russia and then never returned. Ala tells me every minute now counts. The children have been told they'll be put in care if their mums don't come for them. That means a grueling trip across thousands of miles from Ukraine deep into the country that's declared war on them.
I should never have let him go, but we didn't know. They just took him and that was that. My son had seen explosions. I wanted him to relax from the war, and then this happened. I just hope we make it in time.
Russia has been removing children from parts of Ukraine it occupies. It claims it's saving them from danger. But the International Criminal Court calls this illegal deportation. It's why he is now a wanted man. Vladimir Putin has annexed huge chunks of Ukraine and claims everything there is Russian, even the children. And we've found new evidence of how they're treated. This boy's Ukrainian, dressed in the Z mark of Russia's war on his country. He's a classmate of Tatiana's son, who was also taken by the Russians. Sasha has special needs. His mum had to travel into enemy territory to rescue him.
Since seizing power in a coup more than 2 years ago, the military in Myanmar has become increasingly isolated by Western sanctions, but not completely. Russia has moved in to fill the void, becoming its biggest foreign backer. According to the latest UN report, more than $400 million worth of arms have been shipped from Russia to Myanmar since the coup. Here's the BBC's Rebecca Henschke.
Children at a primary school hide under their desks as the sound of fighter jets fills the air. Duck down, someone shouts. When they think it's safe, they run. But the Myanmar military's jet circles back. While crouching in a rubbish ditch just next to the toilet, the children start to pray. God will save you. Don't worry. You can say your prayers louder, one of the adults with them says. They're safe this time. But airstrikes by the military are now a daily occurrence for the people of Myanmar. Monasteries, hospitals, churches and schools have been hit. The deadliest in April, killing more than 170 people, including many women and children. Struggling on the ground to suppress an armed pro-democracy uprising, the military has taken this fight against their own people to the air. Leonie Hardevi is a senior investigator with the group Myanmar Witness that is monitoring the conflict.
The Myanmar military is increasingly relying on its air power because the resistance forces on the ground have been effective.
The junta is increasingly isolated by Western sanctions, but Russia has stepped up to become their strongest foreign backer and biggest arms dealer.
Not only the support has not decreased, Russian representatives have made very clear that despite the coup of 2021, they will continue to provide the Myanmar military with Air Force assets.
The devastating impact of the junta's war in the air is clear at a safe house for injured resistance fighters on the Thai border. Every available space is being used for the injured. Most of them have either lost a leg or an arm. Some have bandages on their eyes. It's very hard to see these young men talk about the future that they wanted and then to see them here so badly injured.
Women in South Korea are urging the government to introduce more family-friendly policies so they can have a career and children if they wish. The country has the world's lowest birth rate, a record it's held for 10 years. The ABC's James Oaten reports.
Mother of one, Kim Se-hee, has to rush home from work to grab her 5-year-old daughter from daycare. Her husband is stuck working long hours at the office, so the evening routine falls on her.
I have to work, do the housework. I have to not just take care of my daughter, I also have to play with her. It's hard because I, as a mother, have to take on more of these things.
For now, it's tough but manageable. However, Se-hee worries she'll have to give up her job as the demands at home increase.
When I went back to work, the idea of having a second child completely disappeared.
Se-hee's story serves as a cautionary tale for younger women in a country where having a successful career and having children is often seen as incompatible. The birth rate has plummeted to 0.78 per woman. In Australia, it's more than double that, 1.70. University student Song Yong-jong is studying to be an interior architect.
아니요, 테이크아웃으로 가져가요.
She's already decided she won't have kids due to Korea's demanding work culture.
There's a culture that makes you feel you have no choice but to overwork. At a company where I interned, I had to work overtime to meet my demanding deadlines. If I had children, I would have to take a break from work. I'm worried about having that career break.
It's a problem South Korean men don't face. Only 4% of men eligible for paternal leave take it. South Korea also has the largest gender pay disparity in the OECD, around 30%, and it has some of the longest working hours. The government this year received huge backlash from Gen Z and millennials when it proposed a 69-hour work week. The idea was you could bank the overtime to spend with family later. The government says it's now looking at a new direction. Former Minister for Women's Equality, Chung Hyung-bak, says female job security is vital to increase the birth rate.
Women no longer agree with the distinction between men at work and women at home. And women think that they should participate in society and work. So they choose work rather than marry and have children.
With the country's population now officially in decline, there's more pressure than ever to fix the problem.
And finally tonight to the US and Canada, where twin cupcake crime capers have left two bakeries scratching their heads. The first committed by a bear in New England, the second a conscientious crook in Vancouver. CNN's Jenny Moose has more on the sweet scandals.
What does this Connecticut bear have in common with a half-baked burglar at a bakery in Vancouver? A sweet tooth for cupcakes. The guy was caught on surveillance cam kicking in the door of a bakery called Sweet Something.
You know, it is a very Canadian break-in. He was really respectful.
He toured the store, used the restroom, sat down for a rest, and then got a mop and a bucket and tried to clean up the mess he made, breaking the glass. How was he as a mopper?
You know, he didn't do the best job. You can give him like an A for effort.
This bear in Avon, Connecticut likewise gets an A for effort. She entered the garage at a bakery called Taste by Spellbound while a van inside was being loaded with goodies. How were you first alerted to the bear?
By one of my employees making noises that I've never heard her make before.
Owner Miriam Stevens and one of her employees did an end run around the building to see if the bear was gone, then turned tail at the sight of her. The bear dragged a container outside loaded with 60 cupcakes.
I honestly think she ate the paper along with the cupcake. And she's just snarfing it down.
60 cupcakes for the bear, 6 chocolate champagne cupcakes were taken by the guy in Vancouver. He also used the store's cell phone to take several selfies wearing orange sunglasses. Are you going to press charges against the guy?
We've asked the police not to. Do they really care about the 6 cupcake thief? Like, we're not upset about it.
And nothing upset the bear until an employee drove towards her honking the horn. The bear was later caught in a barrel trap, then released a distance away. Both bakeries capitalized on the capers by selling cupcakes decorated with orange sunglasses and bears. Just think of the advertising potential. We dreamed up this ad.
Can't bear to be without cupcakes? Forget Yelp. You'll yelp when you see who loves our cupcakes enough to eat 60 of them.
The bear left her mess behind, but the guy cleaning up with a mop takes the cake, not to mention the 6 cupcakes.
Yum cupcakes. Some of your last thoughts before we head off. This is on Auckland's Mayor Wayne Brown. Liz has got in touch. I think I preferred it when it was the case of Where's Wayne and Desley was running things, says Liz. Another listener says, for those small business people like me, Wayne Brown is a breath of non-PC fresh air. Go for it, Wayne, says Alan. Thank you for being with us this evening. The Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the night. You can check out Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or or wherever you get your podcast from if you want to re-listen to anything. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up, talk Scrabble with 11-time national champion Howard Warner, and hear about the word that earned him 257 points, the highest ever score in a world championship.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Talofa lava, ngā mihi and good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. The 48-year-old man, already accused of starting the Loafers Lodge fire, has now been charged with murdering the 5 people who died in the fire. Cyclone-ravaged Esk Valley in Hawke's